Hello, good morning. I'm Matt Addison. David Lynch back with me today as we preview transfer deadline day for Liverpool and the rest of the teams around the top end of the Premier League. Do let us know in the comments what you've made of the January window so far. We'll have a look at that from a Reds perspective and their rivals over the next few minutes. And I suppose we should start, Dave, by just getting your thoughts really on the January window so far. I suppose in some respects, Cody Gakpo feels like a long time ago now, but that was the one signing that Liverpool have done. I'm sure most people would agree that they should have probably gone and got a midfielder as well, but they're not going to. So, sort of, I suppose, out of 10, what would you give the Liverpool January window? What are your thoughts so far?
I think you're right, really, about mentioning that people have sort of forgotten Gakpo. I've sort of been stunned, really, by how that's just been dismissed as if it was meaningless and nothing. Gakpo hasn't really pulled up any trees yet. I think he's sort of slowly improving and he's getting there, and we're seeing some really encouraging signs from him. But obviously, it's not been an immediate, huge impact, and that for that reason, people are talking like Liverpool haven't signed anyone in this window. You know, they've been active in signing a sort of a well-liked player who could have a really big future at the club. So, it is worth giving him credit for that. And I think in podcasts previously as well, we had spoken in the build-up to the window of saying, Liverpool could probably yes, they definitely need a midfielder. That's been the sort of long-standing issues that's been talked about this season. But we did say they probably need a forward as well because, it wasn't just the injuries they've got, but also we felt, the feeling was there that they'd left themselves a little short in the front line over the summer because of the loss of Minamino and Origi in particular. Having those options off the bench was a big part of last season. So to sort of go out and address that need, I think you've got to give them some credit. The problem is that Gakpo hasn't really hit the ground running, and so it's not made a huge difference to where Liverpool were, and therefore, the criticism then comes with, okay, well, that's an issue, and also the midfield hasn't really been dealt with. The midfield thing, I think, in terms of marking it out of 10 would really detract from it because I think it has been the biggest issue all season. I think it's going to continue to be an issue between now and the end of the season. So that does really detract from it. But you'd say the one thing I would say about this transfer window is if not getting a midfielder now allows Liverpool to get the midfielder they want and someone top class. And basically, if they get Jude Bellingham in the summer, this will have all been worth it. If not, then you've got to ask serious questions about strategy because there are several alternatives who possibly would have been available. I think, Moises Caicedo, I know they've pulled the shutters down now, but I think if you go for him early in the window and you put a big bid on the table, I think they very much would have been there to negotiate because I think Tony Bloom set out his position. So, not doing that is fine. If you get what you want, we'll have to wait and see on that, I suppose. So in terms of marking out of 10, maybe a 6 maybe for getting Gakpo and not a midfielder.
Yeah, I think I'm in agreement with you. It does detract obviously hugely the fact that they've not sorted that out, but it doesn't look like they're going to at this moment in time. We'll just touch quickly on Sofyan Amrabat. A couple of comments coming in around him. Speculation apparently that possibly might be going to Barcelona, but he was one really that it kind of never felt like one that Liverpool would go for. It was kind of one of those where his reputation was enhanced a little bit by the World Cup. If they really did want him, they could have got him for probably half the price that they got him now last summer, but obviously chose not to.
Yeah, I think maybe, from what little I've seen of him, maybe a touch limited on the ball for what Liverpool would want and very much sort of feeling like a short-term solution rather than anything more long-term. And I just... Yeah, I think the World Cup played a massive part in that hype. I think he will get a decent move at some point. I'm sure. I think he showed for Morocco he's a very good player. He's not. I say limited on the ball. He's not. He could clearly play for a European elite side if that was the job he was given, is to just break up play and give it. But I just think Liverpool are probably looking for something that's a little bit more sort of long term and a bit more suited to what they want their midfield to look like going forward. But so Amrabat, never really felt like a realistic one for them. But it will be interesting to see what they do in that position going forward because I think, in terms of needing a destroyer in that midfield, I think, you're looking at Fabinho at the moment and, playing really, really poorly and doesn't look like he's going to get back to anything looking like his best for the rest of the season. So maybe when the summer comes around, that is something that maybe needs addressed and, maybe not an Amrabat, but someone of that profile might come onto the radar. It'd be interesting to see what they do with that, really.
Yeah, definitely an interesting one for the summer. I think of all the talk of Matheus Nunes and Jude Bellingham and all of the kind of more interesting midfielders, if you like. Probably the number 6 is becoming a real priority for them to sort out. Probably, I would think, by the summer. Just I will ask you about the summer actually in a second, but just before we move on, obviously a deadline day preview. The one thing that possibly expecting to happen today might be a little bit of interest in Nat Phillips. Sounds like Galatasaray might be an option for him. I think the Athletic were reporting that the last couple of days. It does kind of feel like we've had this conversation about Nat Phillips on every deadline day for about 4 of those by now, but it probably would be the right time for him to move, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I kind of hope he gets a move today, to be honest, because I think his career just felt like a little bit like it's been on hold since he was sort of played a crucial role in getting Liverpool top 4 to the back end of a couple of seasons ago. I would really like to see him go out and get a move. I was sort of surprised, really. Galatasaray is the only name sort of being linked at the moment. You know, a huge club, don't get me wrong, and what an experience that would be for out there for him. But just surprised there's not really any Premier League interest out there, and because I just think he's proved every time he's come into the team that he's, you know, he may not be Liverpool standards in terms of what they want to do, which is challenge for Champions Leagues and try and win the title again. But you know, he surely is a Premier League centre half. I just think, you know, he's better on the ball than I think people give him credit for. Yes, not the quickest, but his reading of the game is very good, physically great. You know, his height, he wins a lot of headers. So I'm just sort of surprised by that, but I do sort of hope at least he gets his move now, because I think if another window passes without getting his move, it's, you know, you feel for him a little bit, because he just deserves to go out there and play some football, because he's shown what he's about, and yeah, so hopefully that can come together for him between now and the end of the day, because I think he deserves it.
Yeah, I was surprised a team like Bournemouth didn't come in for him. I saw they were going for a Ukrainian centre-back last night. That kind of feels like one that you just think, you know, Nat Phillips would be a natural fit to just go in and be a bit more of a guarantee, I suppose.
And it's not like every centre-half in the Premier League as well is lightning quick. You know, teams lower down they can make accommodation for a centre-half who just wins your headers and gets involved in the battles, and then your other centre-half is covering in behind. So I'm just sort of stunned that that's not really come together for him. But, you know, I suppose that's on the scouts around the world. What do I know, really, I suppose. And like I say, hopefully he gets that move to Galatasaray and we can see him flourish there, because he's a good player and a good lad.
Yeah, I think in the past Liverpool had valued him at about 15 million or so. I think maybe that was what was putting people off, but I suspect they probably won't get anything like that if he was to go today. It'd be interesting to see quite how much that fee would be for. But just before we move on then to look at a few of the rivals, a few of the comments coming in around the summer and the ownership and all of that sort of stuff. We don't quite know what's going to happen between now and then in terms of the ownership. But you mentioned Jude Bellingham before. There's going to be other needs as well. It is going to have to be a big summer, no matter who the owners are or what that situation is. Liverpool have got, well, they've left themselves really with plenty of work to do in that window. Yeah,
Liverpool have got the scope to spend massively in the summer coming, in terms of, you know, it was in that piece I wrote for Liverpool.com last week, in terms of, you know, you look at the books and the potential to spend is definitely there, because I think that debt will come down again. I think the infrastructure projects will be close to being paid off. So, and which has been a major drag on finances in recent years. And then obviously there's no real COVID hit now, so we're past all that. So Liverpool will have the capability to spend. My huge worry is, and it's one of the reasons I want the ownership question to be sorted by the summer, is that I feel like FSG are, and you can see the evidence of this in the January window, is leaning towards the idea of keeping the books kind of clean at the moment, and not putting too much debt, or, you know, committing to too much transfer outlay on the basis that they want the new owners to come in to inherit a brilliant situation, and also, you know, to make it more attractive for a sale, and also to essentially, I suppose, maximize their own profit. So that is a little bit of a concern, is that, yes, I think FSG would probably sanction a move for a Jude Bellingham or whatever, but would they go far enough and do what Liverpool need in terms of the complete overhaul that they probably need in midfield? And my suspicion is probably not, because they don't want to make the club look unattractive in terms of for a sale. So that is something that I think really does need to get sorted by the summer. You know, I spoke to someone close to the takeover process in the last couple of weeks, and they, you know, I think summer was always the realistic target. I think some people out there have maybe thought that it was possible to get that sorted by the January window. It's never really been on the cards, but the summer window is a realistic prospect if if everything comes together. And yeah, fingers crossed it can, because I think, it's not that Liverpool need this hugely rich benefactor to come in either. This is just making the most of their spending potential. You've looked at what Arsenal is spending at the moment, having not had Champions League in recent years. Liverpool have the potential to match that sort of spending, not outrageous, but they can spend. The capability to do it is there. But I just think they need new owners to sort of let the leash off a little bit and open things up, because FSG just seems to be keeping it tight now before the sale is completed. So, fingers crossed that situation resolves itself, because I think it's kind of holding Liverpool back at the moment. And, I don't subscribe to some of the over-the-top criticism of FSG maybe, but I do think at the moment the strategy is clearly to hold things back a little bit. And so, yeah, we need that situation sorted, I think.
Yeah, certainly a lot to sort out in that regard. And obviously the outgoing sporting director situation as well to think about before the summer. It's going to be quite the summer for whoever does come in and take on that job. It's probably the biggest summer window that any sporting director at Liverpool has had for a long time.
Yeah, and I also wonder, in terms of the sporting director situation, whether FSG would be sort of willing to make an appointment before they sold the club, in the sense that, someone who comes in, are they really going to feel comfortable that they're definitely going to be part of the project going forward, or a new owner is going to come in and say, well, actually, we've got this guy and we want him to do the job. So it's, I imagine FSG would rather complete the sale before making an appointment. So it's going to be interesting to see whether that situation resolves itself or not, because I think that's because it's such a big summer in terms of what they need to do. They need to all be singing from the same hymn sheet and have a good idea of strategy. And it's so up in the air at the moment because of that sporting director question, as well as the ownership problem. It's a difficult one. And one, like I say, you just hope that the ownership situation does resolve itself now before the summer. And then that would allow an appointment of a new sporting director who, the new owners fully believe in. Hopefully works well with Jurgen Klopp. And then, you get your midfield rebuild that you really need, and hope, it won't take much, I don't think, in terms of to get Liverpool right back up there. They can do it very quickly, because a lot of the tools there, people are forgetting it because the form is poor at the moment, but a lot of the tools there to win a lot of games are still there. They just need a little bit of help in certain areas. And if that can happen, Liverpool will be, right back up there, I'm sure.
Yeah, it does only take one or two bits and suddenly there's a knock-on effect. And we've seen, even with Liverpool in the past, with Arsenal this season, you can make those big jumps. It doesn't have to be, a particularly long process. But let's take a look at some of the other clubs then. We'll start with Arsenal, given we've mentioned them a couple of times. Obviously, they're in a position of strength, which possibly Liverpool should have strengthened from that position a little while ago, but didn't. Jorginho for them is the one that's been linked for today, which is an interesting one. 31 years old, probably wouldn't be necessarily that cheap in terms of wages. It would be an interesting one if he was to go from Chelsea to Arsenal. But then you think, well, Chelsea have got so many other players that they've signed, they are going to have to let one or two of those go at some point.
Yeah, I think it'd be a good move for Chelsea in terms of, like you say, they've signed so many players and they need to sort of start booking some profit now straight onto in terms of their financials. So getting rid of experienced players like Jorginho for decent fee would be sort of a great move for them in terms of FFP in particular. For Arsenal, I sort of don't get it. I think I look at so much of what they've done in the last couple of years and think, what a brilliantly run club. They've done taken a very similar path to Liverpool, a slow building process, and then they've had these young players come through. They've added the right experienced players, and then I looked at them trying to sign Caicedo and thought, what a great signing he would be for them. Really smart move. But then to go from being told Caicedo is not for sale to then say, okay, well, Jorginho, I think that's a move that Liverpool definitely wouldn't have made when they were at their absolute peak. If they couldn't have got Caicedo and he was the target, they wouldn't have got anyone. Whereas going from Caicedo to Jorginho, very different profile of player. I think that's a move where it's okay, we've got to do something, and maybe wouldn't quite work out for them, because Jorginho, I think, he's divided opinion at Chelsea a little bit, and I think he's not going to get any better from this point on in his career. I think that's it, to tie themselves into that. He's 31 now, I think, would be a bit of a risky one, and wouldn't speak to me of a club that's strategically getting everything completely bang on, to go from Caicedo to him. So I'm interested to see whether they do that before the deadline comes, because just a funny one. It makes me sort of slightly less worried about Arsenal going on to become completely dominant for the next sort of 5 or 6 years, because I think it would be a bit of a questionable move for me, that one.
Yeah, certainly would be an interesting decision. I'm sure there could be a couple more interesting things at Chelsea as well. I think they've already signed 6 or 7 players in this January window. Possibly could go out and spend even more. Still in talks with Enzo Fernandez. Obviously was linked with Liverpool at one stage. And you couldn't even rule out Moises Caicedo if they were to put a ridiculous bid on the table that Brighton just couldn't say no to. I mean, I don't know what the answer to this question is, but what on earth, how are they spending this much money? It just doesn't seem possible for them to be able to do that.
Well, I think we know about the long contracts, don't we? Yeah. The fact that for FFP that will allow them to get around it. I think that the real problem is that, okay, that's a great idea, and in terms of they will circumvent FFP by doing that, and every time they sell a player, that is instant profits on the book. So, for example, if they sell Conor Gallagher for 40 million, that's straight on the books as profit. They don't have to spread that out over the length of any contract. So it is kind of a great FFP workaround. But the problem is, if any one of these players that they're signing on a 7 years contract doesn't sort of quite work out, or gets a bad injury and is not the same player again, or just doesn't adapt to this league, which we've seen time and time again happens, then you've got a 7 year contract with a player you don't want. You're going to be stuck in a situation where you're trying to continually loan them out, and you can't sort of get them off the books, and it will really restrict what Chelsea can do in forthcoming transfer windows. They can't do this every year. So I think they're taking this one shot now of, right, we're going to get in all these young talented players and hope that they pay off. But if a couple of them don't, or 2 or 3 don't work out, I think they're going to have a real problem in terms of offloading them, and it's going to restrict what they're going to be able to do, 2 transfer windows down the line. If they realise they've got a problem at left back that they need to sort, the money's going to be tight in terms of for them for FFP. So particularly because UEFA are going to close this loophole in terms of the length of the contracts you can offer. So it seems very high risk to me, and I think there's a very high possibility that it sort of blows up in Chelsea's faces. But we'll have to see. Maybe this is an absolute masterstroke that we haven't seen all coming, and it's every single one of these signings going to work out. But the odds are against that happening. Let's be honest.
Yeah, and as you say, it could restrict them at some point in the future. I know there's a lot of Liverpool fans, maybe on social media, that look at that and think, wouldn't that be wonderful if Liverpool were doing that? But it does come with its own risks as well. It certainly is going to be interesting to see how they look. Just quickly, before we finish as well, I wanted to touch quickly on João Cancelo as well, which was a surprise one from Manchester City to Bayern Munich. Looks like he's going there on loan, an option to buy at the end of the season as well. I mean, that one came a little bit out of the blue. The suggestion is that possibly Pep Guardiola and the player have fallen out a little bit. But I mean, it does, again, just go to show how quickly things can change. Probably 12 months or so ago, João Cancelo was in the conversation for being maybe one of the best players in the Premier League. Now he's on his way out. Yeah,
it just shows that sort of Pep Guardiola, if there is any sort of friction with any of his players, will just do everything he can to offload them as quickly as possible. He doesn't really stand for that, does he? And yeah, it just completely came out of the blue there, really. The willingness to sell into sort of a rival for winning the Champions League is really interesting. I think it's just shows how ruthless Pep Guardiola can be. And, there's also talk that Bernardo Silva could maybe go on deadline day, which again would be, a crazy one, really, when you consider all that he's contributed to City. That's another one that's felt like it's been on the cards for quite a while. Bernardo Silva's been linked with leaving for every window for the past 4 or 5 windows, but now it's not Liverpool who are in a title race with them. They're willing to weaken the squad, unfortunately. But yeah, I suppose it just, like I say, speaks to Pep Guardiola's ruthlessness and his single-mindedness, and obviously feels like he can still get the job done with the players he's got available to him. So, I think if you're Arsenal though, and you're looking at it, you're thinking, well, that's a major boost, particularly if Silva goes as well, and two big players for City to lose in this window. You'd certainly think it'd strengthen Arsenal's chance to win the league.
Yeah, 2 of the very, very best players in the Premier League when they're the best. I think I'd certainly take both of them at Liverpool, but I suspect that probably isn't realistic. But anyway, we shall leave it there for now. We'll have all the updates, of course, throughout the day on Liverpool and all of their rivals on Liverpool.com, Blood Red and the Liverpool Echo. Much more to come throughout the week as well as we build up to the Wolves game next Saturday. But for now, we'll leave it there. We'll see you later.